Another tale of forced demolition strikes a family in China. The victims say authorities railroaded them, and now they've lost everything. An over $400,000 fine over a rule-breaking gain of $300. The Chinese Communist Party ramps up its clampdown on the country's fintech industry. Parts of northern China are seeing renewed lockdown orders amid a surge of new virus cases. Businesses are closed, flights are canceled, and residents aren't allowed to leave the city. Lawmakers from 3 European countries meet with Taiwan's president, but the talks come alongside growing ire with Beijing. Welcome to China in Focus. I'm Tiffany Meyer. A new report coming out of China detailing the forced teardown of one family's home. That's after local authorities decided they wanted the land it sat on. After turning down a compensation offer as too low, the family lost everything when officials found an excuse to take what they wanted. Let's take a look.
One family in China has lost its land, home, and all possessions in just 1 week. The family's now dire situation comes after local authorities in the southern Chinese city of Changsha earmarked the land for other purposes. It's called forced demolition, a common practice where Chinese officials rescind land rights, oust residents, and tear down existing structures to make way for other, often more profitable projects. Victim and resident Tan shares his story with NTD. It happened in mid-November. Tan's family owns nearly 2 acres of farmland and had built 2 houses, one large, one small, on the property. He explained that local authorities issued a notice on November 14th, setting a deadline for a so-called rectification of the area. They claimed the smaller of Tan's houses didn't have a permit. But just 2 days later, authorities, along with hundreds of others, trespassed on Tan's land. On the property, they destroyed farmland, crops, and tea-growing plantations. 4 days after that, authorities returned with the same backup, this time to demolish Tan's smaller house. They drove 3 of Tan's elderly family members out of the home, locking them in a hotel room before tearing down the building. But the crowd didn't stop at the small house. Tan says they deliberately damaged the outer walls of the larger house, too, despite it having a registered permit. That way, when they again came back 2 days later, they claimed the larger house was a safety hazard due to those damages and must also be destroyed.
When they were demolishing the smaller house that didn't have a permit, they also damaged our building with a permit. They drilled holes into it. Then authorities issued an appraisal report saying that it was dangerous to live in, then demolished everything.
Tan says his family received no compensation for the ruined farmland and crops. On top of that, their belongings are gone. Some were stolen, with others seized by authorities and the crowd with them.
Many of our belongings, they threw them outside and broke them. Some were stolen. They took some away and refused to give them back to us. All these things were to force us to sign the agreement.
Tan says authorities first started trying to seize the family's land in October. From then on, many local leaders paid them visits, trying to talk them into surrendering the property. They were offered compensation, but the suggested figure was based on a 10-year-old valuation and well below current market price. The family turned down the offer. Also, prior to the forced demolition, the same 3 elderly members of Tan's family were shut in the hotel for 2 days, pressured to sign over the property rights. Relatives and friends were able to get them out later. With their home gone, the family is now taking refuge with other relations. NTD reached out to the local authorities for comment, but they didn't get back to us.
It seems Beijing missed the memo on the expression the punishment should fit the crime. That's as a Chinese tech company is facing an over $400,000 fine over a relatively small infraction. Tencent is one of China's largest technology giants. A financial subsidiary under it, called Tenpay, was found to have violated foreign exchange rules, among other misconduct, resulting in an illegal gain of around $300. The penalty comes amid Beijing's ramped-up regulatory clampdown on its financial and tech industries. Tenpay's platform expanded in recent years to finance transactions for Chinese social media giant WeChat, often referred to as China's version of Facebook. Messaging app WeChat is the country's most popular social media site, boasting more than 1 billion monthly active users worldwide. A related clampdown, this time on WeChat, started last week. The Chinese Communist Party ordered 9 of its major state-run companies to restrict their employees' use of the app, citing data security concerns. One of those companies staffs over 1 million employees. Companies like Tencent now have an almost unimaginably large trove of user data at their disposal. While China's communist regime has been known to seek and exert control over similar pools of information. China's real estate sector continues sliding downhill. For the last 2 decades, it's racked up big debt and earned big money along the way. But now, as the economy worsens, the same business model could be their undoing. Some investors are selling their shares, and others, in contrast, are buying in the hope that one day things might change for the better. And that hope is not without reason. On Monday, the shares of debt-trapped Evergrande fell about 5%. This after its chairman sold part of his stake to raise more than $300 million for the company. And the company's debt is 1,000 times this. It's $300 billion. Another Chinese company that's in trouble, Fantasia, suspended trading in its shares on Monday. Last week, the company's Hong Kong subsidiary started the process of selling all its assets to pay its debts. So far, at least 4 Chinese real estate companies have defaulted on their dollar bonds. Some others are selling their assets to raise cash. But some international investors want to buy the devalued shares of the struggling companies, expecting they will survive and once again grow into cash cows. And they have their reasons. In 2015, the Chinese real estate giant Kaisa suffered from an offshore bond default. This was very rare for investors outside China. At the time, the company made it after some debt restructuring, and 2 years later, it was listed on the stock market again. But during the crisis this time, Kaisa missed some of its bond interest payments. The company's credit is rated at the level of CCC-. That means the company is not at all credible. Right now, it's trying a similar maneuver on its debt structure as it did years ago. The effect this time remains to be seen. Now to China's virus situation. Chinese authorities are stepping up virus control measures in parts of northern China. Health workers tested over 170,000 city residents in a single day. This as a new virus outbreak hits. NTD's Don Ma has more.
Parts of northern China are seeing a surge in new virus cases. China's National Health Commission said Monday that nearly half of the total cases in the country were found in Inner Mongolia. And by the looks of it, local authorities aren't going easy on virus prevention and control measures. In the city of Manzhouli, Inner Mongolia, local authorities are all but locking down the city. Residents are prohibited from leaving the city. Public transportation has been suspended. Trains and flights are being canceled. Hospitals and clinics are closed for all non-urgent services. And schools, local businesses, and entertainment venues are all closed as well. A local in one of the city's districts told the Epoch Times that any business owner that opens their doors right now will have their business license revoked. On top of lockdown measures, authorities are also holding multiple rounds of public virus testing. The city is home to around 150,000 residents, and amid freezing temperatures, many have been spotted in waiting lines to get tested, sometimes stretching hundreds of feet long. Another local tells NTD she's not allowed to leave her home. We distorted her voice to protect her identity.
The first wave of nucleic acid testing was done yesterday, and the community was locked down. And then the second wave of nucleic acid testing was done. Dongshan community has been designated as a high-risk area. We're not allowed to go outside now. Wherever you look in Manzhouli, there are basically no cars anywhere.
According to reports, the first round of testing started Sunday morning, while the second round started Monday. More than 175,000 virus tests have been administered as of Monday morning. Don Ma, NTD News.
The Chinese Communist Party is sending out invitations for the Winter Olympics in Beijing, but not everyone is on the list. Certain Western politicians won't receive the welcome, specifically those pushing for a diplomatic boycott of the Games. That's according to Chinese state media Global Times on Monday. China's foreign ministry also commented on the issue, saying China's success in hosting the games is not dependent on the attendance of officials from, quote, certain countries. This after U.S. President Biden and UK Prime Minister Boris Johnson said their countries were considering a diplomatic boycott of the Games, meaning they wouldn't send officials to Beijing, but athletes primed to compete could still attend. U.S. Congress members from both sides of the aisle have pressed the government to take action. That's amid U.S. accusations that China is committing genocide against ethnic minorities in its Xinjiang region. China's foreign ministry said on Friday that China has received more than 1,500 applications to attend the Games from the U.S. Olympic Committee. Those documents should feature the names of U.S. athletes and officials planning to attend, but no details have been revealed. So far, only one top global leader has accepted Beijing's invitation, Russian President Vladimir Putin. Ahead of the Winter Olympics in China, in a region that will be hosting some of the games, a Swiss snowmaker is trying to make artificial snow. That region sees very little natural snow. And that's not the only problem. Rosanna Philpott reports.
Strong wind is hampering snowmaking for the Winter Olympics in China.
I want to try to get the snow quality on my jacket, but it's too much wind.
Swiss man Jacques Fournier has been making snow since 1994.
The temperature is minus 11 degrees.
His team ensures snow is properly made on the trails, ramps and slopes in the arid heights of Zhangjiakou, nearly 125 miles northwest of Beijing in Hebei province. But the arid climate are making things tricky. The wind is too strong for the snow to stick.
Actually, it's a lot of difference because here is no humidity, it's very dry and it's a lot of wind. So on that kind of condition, the goal and the target is really to make the snow and to make the snow compact and to prepare rapidly to not let use it by the wind.
Zhangjiakou will host Nordic, snowboarding and freestyle skiing events at the Games in February 2022. However, the area receives little natural snow. This fact has raised concerns among environmentalists about demand for water to make artificial snow. On a recent particularly gusty day, snow guns sprayed 2.1 litres of water per second. The more the wind blows snow off course, the more is needed. Alpine skiing events will take place at the National Alpine Ski Centre in Beijing, which gets even less snow. Games officials say conservation efforts will minimise the impact of water used during the Games.
Europe is stepping up its cooperation with Taiwan. 10 legislators from 3 European countries are on an 8-day trip to the island, and they will attend a legislative forum in its capital.
A group of lawmakers from EU nations is making their first trip to Taiwan together. The EU delegation from Latvia, Lithuania, and Estonia met with the island's president, Tsai Ing-wen, on Monday.
The minister of our National Development Council, Mr. Kung Ming Sen, has led an economic and trade delegation to Lithuania last month and signed 6 MOUs to strengthen both sides' cooperation in the fields of semiconductor, satellite, and biotechnology. In the future, we also look forward to having more cooperation and exchange with Latvia and Estonia in even more fields.
The partnership comes amid an even deeper spat between the Baltic nations and Beijing. Tsai told visiting lawmakers they must work together.
Now the world faces challenges posed by the expansion of authoritarianism and the threat of disinformation. Taiwan is more than willing to share its experience at combating disinformation with its European friends. We must safeguard our shared values to ensure our free and democratic way of life.
Lithuania has faced sustained pressure from China, especially after it allowed Taiwan to open a de facto embassy in its capital. Communist China claims Taiwan as its own territory and has upped military and diplomatic pressure on Taiwan to force its claims. But Tsai says democratic Taiwan will not bow to threats. She also told the lawmakers that Taiwan and the 3 Baltic nations, which were once part of the Soviet Union, share similar experiences of breaking free from authoritarian rule and fighting for freedom. One of the experiences is the pro-democracy protest against the Soviet Union over 3 decades ago. It's called the Baltic Way, where some 2 million people in the Baltic states made a human chain to demand independence from the Soviet Union. The human chain spanned over 400 miles from Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania. Now the head of the Lithuanian delegation says he hopes to see even stronger ties with Taiwan.
There are lots of opportunities for economic and cultural cooperation between our countries. A long-term, stable, and efficient cooperation is possible precisely because our societies are based on the same principle of democracy, human rights, and rule of law.
The lawmakers will attend Taiwan's 2021 Open Parliament Forum this Thursday. Beijing has rejected the island's participation in international forums, which would give it international recognition. Lithuania also plans to open a representative office in Taiwan early next year. China's foreign ministry condemned the Baltic lawmakers' visit on Monday. They said, "We urge the parties concerned to be cautious with their words and acts and to stop sending wrong signals to the Taiwan Independence Force." Earlier, Beijing reduced its level of diplomatic relations with Lithuania and also recalled its ambassador. But the U.S. has strongly backed Lithuania, which is a NATO ally, in its spat with China.
Chinese Communist Party head Xi Jinping met with his top generals, and Taiwan felt it. On Sunday, Taiwan's Air Force warded off 27 Chinese aircraft that had entered its air defense zone. It's Beijing's latest threat towards Taiwan. The island's defense minister said on Monday China's military is trying to wear out Taiwan's armed forces with its repeated missions nearby, but Taiwan is capable of responding. Normally, the communist regime flexes its muscles at Taiwan on significant dates and occasions, such as Xi Jinping's meeting with important members of the Chinese military, or when the CCP celebrates the founding of the party, the army, or the communist regime. And the CCP often uses Taiwan's presidential elections to issue threats against the democratically ruled island. The most common method they use is sending aircraft into Taiwan's air defense zone. Sometimes the CCP also sends warships over the middle line in the Taiwan Strait. That line is meant to separate Taiwan from mainland China. An air defense zone doesn't equate to a country's airspace. The air defense zone goes beyond the airspace. Aircraft entering the zone are seen as hostile and will be warned away. This also gives the country time to respond to a potential attack. The trial of 47 Hong Kong pro-democracy activists resumed on Monday. They are being charged under the national security law imposed by Beijing. The law punishes what Beijing broadly defines as subversion, secession, terrorism, and collusion with foreign forces. Authorities can punish violators with up to life in prison. These activists are charged with conspiracy to commit subversion for being involved in last year's unofficial primary elections held by the pro-democracy camp. The elections were to determine candidates to field the legislative elections. Authorities said the primary elections were part of a plot to paralyze Hong Kong's government. And since 2019, after months of protests in Hong Kong, Beijing has been heavily clamping down on dissidents. In addition to the national security law, the communist regime also changed the criteria for Hong Kong's elections and its legislature. These tactics are designed to ensure an overwhelmingly pro-Beijing majority. Due to the crackdown, most pro-democracy activists have been jailed, silenced, or have sought asylum overseas. Protests are banned, and one of Hong Kong's major pro-democracy newspapers, Apple Daily, had to close after the police arrested its staff and froze its assets. According to Hong Kong's local media, a judge decided to postpone the case again. The defendants will be tried from late January. Commerce Secretary Gina Raimondo visits Detroit today, and she is pressing Congress to approve $52 billion to expand U.S. semiconductor manufacturing.
Secretary Raimondo tweeted on Monday, "Semiconductors play a vital role in our economic and national security. The $52 billion investment in domestic semiconductor production is a vital step forward." At a roundtable in Detroit, Raimondo meets with Michigan politicians and executives from General Motors, Ford, and Chrysler's parent company, Stellantis. There's an ongoing chip shortage due to the supply chain disruptions caused by the pandemic. Global automakers have been forced to cut production as a result. According to Auto Forecast Solutions, Michigan automakers made 280,000 fewer cars this year due to chip shortages. The problem will intensify with widespread adoption of electric cars, which require more chips per vehicle. To strengthen the supply chain and boost competition with China, the U.S. Senate passed a bill in June awarding $52 billion for semiconductor manufacturing, but it has not yet cleared the House.
And we need Congress, the House, to pass the CHIPS Act, or USICA, as quickly as possible so that we can get to the business of making more chips in America.
House and Senate leaders said recently that they will negotiate to seek final agreement on the bill. Meanwhile, Samsung Electronics announced last week that it will build a new $17 billion plant in Taylor, Texas, to make advanced chips. The White House has welcomed the move.
The Chinese Communist Party may have dealt another blow to the global supply chain. It's preventing outsiders from accessing information about cargo ships in Chinese waters.
Pandemic delays triggered much of the current supply chain crisis. Now global shipping issues may be getting worse. According to reports, nearly 90% fewer vessels operating in Chinese waters are sending out signals to shipping data companies. The substantial drop comes in just the last few weeks. Beijing blames the change on national security concerns, but that data is critical for shipping companies. They use it to track ships fitted with an automatic identification system, or AIS. That way, the companies know when each ship is anchored, unloaded, or departed, details that help improve port efficiency. China accounts for 6 of the 10 busiest container ports in the world. Trade analyst for Vessels Value, Charlotte Cook, shed some light on the situation. She says some AIS transponders were removed along Chinese coastlines earlier this month, at the instruction of Chinese national security authorities, adding that only those installed by so-called qualified parties still remain. Some analysts suspect the culprit is China's new Personal Information Protection Law, which took effect November 1st. The law requires companies to obtain the Chinese regime's approval before they take personal information out of China. It seems to reflect Beijing's fear that its data will fall into the control of foreign governments. Chinese state-run media have reported that since last year, China's national security agencies have found that foreign companies had built more than 700 AIS transponders along China's coastline. Also, according to Chinese media, foreign agencies had been partially using these transponders to collect China's data. The reports accused the foreign agencies of interfering with China's law enforcement activities and seriously endangering the country's economic and sovereign security. But a U.S.-based China affairs analyst offers another perspective. He says it has more to do with the Chinese regime's political security than with its national security.
They are afraid that economic activities will be analyzed by others, but what are the consequences of those analyses? Doesn't it just reveal that China's GDP is actually low and that it's not as high as they say? Besides, they're secretly shipping certain things to Iran and North Korea, and they don't want to be caught.
With Christmas approaching, a loss of tracking data from China could spell major issues for the global shipping industry.
The CCP would be happy to see that the U.S. supply chain is messed up and inflation is high. If its inflation is high, the U.S. will be more willing to cooperate with the CCP.
Some call it a double-edged sword. The tighter the Chinese Communist Party, or CCP, controls data, the more it will draw foreign suspicions. But at the same time, the country is becoming more and more isolated from the rest of the world as it adopts increasingly strict policies in the name of protecting its national security.
And that's all for today's China in Focus. Thanks for watching and see you tomorrow.